Louisville, national champions, 1980.
Cardinals have won the national championship. 75th NCAA college basketball champions.
Hello, good evening, everybody. It is Wednesday, March 20th, and welcome back for another episode of the Third Banner Pod. I am your host tonight, Kyle, and I'm joined by Patrick, and we are here to talk about the latest coaching updates, among other things, and we will be getting into a deep dive with Dusty May, because I do think, and maybe I'm wasting my time here, but I am confident that this deep dive will pay off. And I'm confident that if Dusty's on the fence at all, I'm confident he's going to see his deep dive and go, you know what, I'm coming to Louisville thanks to the Third Banner Pod.
That's
all
right.
Conceited jokes aside, I do think we are in for some serious contention with Dusty May. I do think, I've said it, I know other platforms have heard me say it, that I've thought for a long time Dusty May was the number 2 candidate. Now, I know some people have mixed reactions about that. I don't know how you feel about it, Patrick, but I have felt that way for a while now.
Yeah, no, I think the writing's been on the wall for a long while in this search. There's been some talk about a mystery number 2. Maybe Billy Donovan's out there, but all signs have pointed to May being that number 2. And it looks like he's up to bat right now. So, like him or don't like him, I think he's going to be the guy.
For sure. So, first off, Eric, good evening. Reggie, good to see you in here, man. Power 10 in the house. Daniel, good to see you in here. Louisville Go Cards says Cronin is greater than May. Couch House, always good to see you, man. Larry, Welch. And then I could keep going down the list, but, we've got to actually start talking about something, or you guys won't stick around now, will you? So we want to start with what we heard first today as far as coaching updates. Obviously, we got the news that we have been expecting, or at least most of us have been expecting for a while. And I actually sent a tweet this morning because I started to get just a sliver of hope. Just a sliver, Pat. Just thinking like, this is really dragging on, and they're about to start playing in the tournament. And every other coach that was rumored to be going somewhere that decided to stay, every other coach appears to have agreed to an extension. So I'm thinking, we still haven't heard a word. We haven't heard anything other than he's more interested than you may think. But even then, I was still very skeptical. And they even always caveated it, people that would say that with, it's going to be hard to actually pull off, but there's more interest than you think. So this morning, I finally ripped off a tweet just saying, I still don't think this is going to happen, but it just seems odd that every other candidate that's been rumored at other places has signed an extension by now because they're about to play. And we haven't heard anything. But sure enough, a few hours after that, we did get the news that Scott Drew is going to be staying at Baylor. Now, there was a guy last night that tweeted it out that I guess Hoops Weiss or something or Wise. I don't know much about him other than he's been recently unreliable. Like he's had a couple of scoops that just didn't pan out, but other people swore by him. So maybe it was last night that he really decided to stick at Baylor, but we definitely knew today Eric Crawford hinting around at it. Then Jeff Goodman sent a tweet out confirming that he will be staying at Baylor. So that kind of leads us to where we're at now. I don't know how you felt about that, but for me, Pat, it didn't even bother me because I never thought we were going to get him in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, Scott Drew's the home run guy out there. So you always are holding out hope that, hey, man, hopefully this guy looks at Louisville, looks at our NIL situation. We can offer him more money. Maybe he wants that next challenge. But like you, I mean, I always thought that was like not fool's gold, but a 10% chance of happening. And, that Hoops Wise guy, like you said, he's been wrong often lately. I think he said, who was he? Oh, Porter was going to go to
DePaul, yeah, he was where
didn't
he was the
happen.
first one to report that. Everybody took off running with that, and
Yeah.
I mean, it may have been realistic or legit. It may have just fallen through. That does happen, and that's what makes me nervous
Yeah.
about Dusty May. But
Yeah.
because you just never know, man.
But I tell you what, if you wanna turn your luck around when predicting stuff, just predict something bad for Louisville, and you'll get it right. So Hoops Wise was the first one out there last night with the Drew stuff, and that seems to come to fruition.
Yeah.
Drew also had that press conference.
Yeah, and when I look at it,
go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, I didn't know you were still talking. I thought you stopped.
I was just going to say, Drew had that press conference today where he kind of, I mean, it wasn't a extremely committal answer, but he said, "Hey, Baylor's my home. I hope to win many championships here." I think the nail in the coffin for me was Goodman coming out, because Goodman isn't going to put his neck out on the line unless something's definitely going to get done.
Right.
But like you, man, you want to believe that Scott Drew can happen. But there was always a part of me that was like, it's too good to be true. So I was always looking at who's that second guy, who could it be, who can we look at? And like we said, it's pretty obvious that it's probably Dusty May.
Yeah, so I'm not too upset because I never had the expectation Scott Drew was coming. It was kind of weird when it was officially announced. I started to get a sliver of hope this morning, like I said, just because we hadn't heard anything yet, but it wasn't even enough hope to really be a letdown. But I will say, going into Dusty May, I felt like for a long time he was the number 2 guy. I feel like the signs have been there that, like, when we hear, hey, there's a guy that they feel like they can get, but they are going to take a swing at Scott Drew first. For one, I completely understand why Josh Hurd would do that. I actually think you need to do that at a program like Louisville. You need to swing the fences. That same Hoops Wise guy was saying it was like $8.5 million offer, I believe, is what I saw. Yep. That's a hell of an offer. That's not something that you just, like, it's one thing if, I don't know, Villanova offers Scott Drew, and I'm just throwing school out there, but then they're like, we're going to offer him. He makes $4.5 million, maybe. I don't know what he makes because it's private. It's Baylor. But let's say he makes $4 million. They're like, we're gonna pay $4.5, $5 million. Okay, right. That's a raise. But Louisville, I mean, they offered. I mean, they swung the fences hard, and you have to do that. You have to do that, in my opinion. At a school like Louisville, you have to swing for the fences. But we've always heard there's a guy they really liked. I've been saying it for a long time. I thought it was Dusty May, which kind of gets me into what some people have said today. I've heard different things. Some people don't think that Dusty May is anywhere close to being a done deal and that he may not even be the number 2 guy. I know I've heard on different platforms that Michigan leads for Dusty May and that we will lose him to Michigan if we pursue him. I've heard other people say, nothing's changed at all, that Josh Hurd doesn't really know who he wants, and that he's going to just kind of wait until the tournament happens and pick the best team he can find that makes a run. And I don't know. Here's how I feel. We all hear different things. Some people hear very credible things that just don't come true. And there's a lot of people with sources, and a lot of people none of us really know for sure. So there is that element. Like, they've done a really good job of keeping this under wraps. And so let's take all sourcing out of it, and let's just kind of use a little bit of common sense in a way. Like, in my opinion, common sense, that's subjective because somebody else can think my common sense is stupid and that their common sense is actually the way to go. But my common sense tells me that this job has pretty much been known to be open since the beginning of the year. And I don't think Josh Hurd has been sitting around waiting, doing nothing. I think we can all agree on that. And from everything I've heard about Josh Hurd, a guy who I do not know, but everything I've heard is that he's very methodical. He's very analytical. And he's a very much a planner and likes things very structured. So if that is true, I cannot imagine that with Scott Drew saying no, he has no backup plan and he's just can't figure out who he can get. Like, yeah, he might have a couple of guys besides Scott Drew who he thought might be interested and they're not. But I just have a hard time believing there's nobody out there that's in play that would want this job that Josh Hurd hasn't zeroed in on in the event that Scott Drew says no, which we all thought was probably going to happen. I am guessing Josh Hurd is not shocked that Scott Drew said no. I'm guessing he wasn't like, holy crap, I don't know what to do now. And so, like, I've heard multiple people say, I think maybe we're just going to wait it out. And maybe that is the plan. I can't say it's not, but it just surprises me that we would have this knowledge that this job's going to open for this long and still not have any clue where we're going with this. It doesn't add up. And that's where, to me, Dusty May comes in. Now, could Dusty May say, I don't really want the Louisville job? Thanks for considering me, but I want to go to Michigan. He could. I don't know. That would surprise me just from what I've heard, but it could happen. And Michigan's not a bad job, and it's in the Big Ten, which is going to be one of the big two. That could be something that maybe he looks at and says, they're going to be able to one day really have a lot more NIL in basketball if they don't already. I mean, I don't know. I know we have a really good NIL collective, and it was misused under Kenny Payne, but maybe Michigan has an even better program. I don't know, but I have a hard time believing it. I have a hard time believing that if we go all in on Dusty May, he's going to say, no, thanks, I want to go to Michigan. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, no, I mean, to kind of go back to
bias here.
Yeah. To kind of go back to some of your points, I think, first of all, when you're talking about Scott Drew and us offering $8.5 million, I think, you've got people on two sides here. And I think most people are reasonable in their takes here and probably lie on this first side that I'm going to talk about. But, having that as semi-public information, Louisville's out there offering Scott Drew $8.5 million. They've got $4 million in NIL to spend on their roster. I think regardless of what Drew's decision is, I personally think that's a great thing. You're telling the college football world, hey, we're serious. I know we've been down for 5 years, 6 years now, but we are serious about getting back into the game because we're going to throw around this money. Right. And all these rumors that Louisville is in huge financial trouble. And I'm not talking, we could be in financial issues from a P&L standpoint, but obviously there's somebody out there, whether it's our money, booster money, that's willing to spend money. So I think having that out there is a good thing for Louisville basketball. There's some people who are going to say, hey, the fact that we've made it so public that we wanted Scott Drew and now he's turned us down, that was a mistake. We shouldn't have made it public. Now it looks like we got turned down by some guy who wants to stay at Baylor, who's not as good of a historical program as us. I can see that point a little bit, but I'm leaning more towards, hey, it's out there that we swung and we tried to put a lot of money down, and that's a good thing. So I wanted to hit on that first. Secondly, to your point on, Josh and looking at the different options and what has Josh been doing. Listen, Josh is an athletic director. He's green in a sense, but he's worked in an athletic department for probably 15 to 20 years now. He knows what he's doing. He knew that this job was most likely going to be open. And even if he didn't think it was going to be open, if he learned anything from Tom Jurich and probably other ADs he worked for, it's you've got to constantly be analyzing who that next guy is going to be. So Josh has most likely been looking at this since the beginning of the year, if not before, and he probably stepped up his efforts towards mid-year when he knew that, the Kenny Payne era was going to come to an end. So like you said, I think
Cutting in
he's
and out
had
on
that
me.
list. I think he's
There you are.
reached out to plenty of people. I think he knows who probably wants to take this job, who won't take this job, and he's thought about all that.
Yep.
And of course, we don't know for sure who that number 2 guy is, but like we've said, the signs point to Dusty. And I think that, yes, there's Michigan out there. I think I can't see Dusty May picking anyone else over us, but especially I can't see him picking anyone else over us other than Michigan. And I just get the sense that through the talks that our local media has had and even national guys, that we're in a position here to get Dusty if we want to. And another thing I was considering today is that it's possible that maybe Dusty said, hey, I need a decision from you guys. And maybe this whole Scott Drew finally coming out and saying I'm staying at Baylor, maybe that has to do with Dusty putting the pressure on us and then us saying, hey, Scott, we can't wait any longer.
It could. I have some thoughts on that. I did want to address the chat. I see a couple of Muzz comments. Nick Coffey was on ESPN Fayetteville. I don't know what it was. I didn't hear it. I will say Nick Coffey is a huge Eric Musselman fan. So I don't know Nick Coffey, but I've listened to his show a few times, and I've seen a few of his tweets enough to know that he is a huge Eric Musselman guy. He's been a huge Eric Musselman guy for years. So it doesn't surprise me that they had him on. I don't know if that means anything or if he's hearing anything. I have no idea. So I have not heard. I've heard that Eric Musselman's like a guy who, if things fall through with a couple of people, he could end up being a guy we look at. But again, we are all speculating. We don't truly know. We're not in the meetings with Josh Hurd. Any information I get is secondhand and it's breadcrumbs. And again, there's only a very small group of people that really know what's going on. So everybody gets little morsels of things, and I think we're all kind of guessing here. So I don't know if Eric Musselman's higher on the list. Hell, maybe he's the second guy. Maybe he is. I'm sticking with Dusty. I just think that's who it is. But, we'll see. So with that being said, I know some people, the last point I want to get to before we do the deep dive into Dusty May is I hear the term smokescreen all the time anymore. Like, it's just a term that I think it's so misused. And so when all this stuff about Dusty May yesterday finally made it out, like to me, none of it was anything that was breaking. I feel like it was just people understanding that, hey, Dusty May is a real candidate. He's a guy we are really pushing. I agree with that take. I know Diener had the tweet, and I know a couple other people had some stuff come out. None of that moved me as far as thinking like, oh, now that they're talking about it, Dusty May. I've thought Dusty May was the second candidate. Whether I'm right or wrong, we'll find out together. But I've thought that. But then you had a lot of people that were like, this just seems like a smokescreen. But what are we hiding? I guess because a smokescreen means that you're distracting somebody and there's something else going on behind the scenes. So my question would be, what is the end game of throwing Dusty May's name out there when you're still waiting on an answer at that time from Scott Drew? We hadn't gotten the answer yet. I don't seem to understand what the end game would be like. Hey, let's just throw Dusty May's name out there. Now, I'll tell you what makes more sense to me. And I don't know this. This is also conjecture. So now I'm going to do my own version of conjecture. What I think, if anything makes sense to me, using, Occam's razor, sometimes the simplest solution is the easiest. What makes sense is when some of that stuff came out, it would make sense to me that maybe it got kind of quiet on our end because he's in the tournament and he doesn't need that extra noise in the background. And so to me, it would make more sense to me that all of a sudden it was like, let's not focus on this. Let's not push this, because the man's got to play a game in a couple of days with his team that he's on. That's a big deal. It's Florida Atlantic. I mean, Dusty May, whether he takes this job, whether he goes to Michigan, or whether he does the unthinkable for a second year in a row and decides to stay at FAU, I think his goal is to, hey, let's just keep this noise in the background so it doesn't affect my team right now. Let's just focus on the here and now. So to me, it makes more sense that once this stuff starts coming out, all of a sudden it gets radio silent, because we really don't want to distract the guy and create a nuisance as much as we can. Obviously, you can't control what social media does, but on the university end, they certainly can clamp it down and just not entertain it at all. I just have a hard time believing it's some sort of smoke screen that's meant to distract you from some other hidden agenda that we don't know about. I mean, I guess we'll see, but that seemed to be a popular belief about yesterday's news. I just don't, I'm not buying it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you make some good points there. There's, like you said, a smoke screen is to, hey, we're over here so that we can sneakily do this over here. And there doesn't seem to be a candidate that you would need to do that with, in the sense that, hey, we're going to make everybody think we're hiring this guy so that you can come in here quietly and take our job. That's right. Any other candidate out there would, we'd be treating the same way. There's no, unless you're going and stealing like John Calipari or something from Kentucky. There's no reason to do that.
And I don't think you'd use another coach to do that. Like, it just doesn't make sense when you really break it down. Like, I don't think they'd be like, let's just make Dusty May a human sacrifice so we can go get this hidden unknown coach that, we're trying to keep, locked up under a scene. If they didn't want the coach's name out there, then I just don't think the university end would say anything at all. And agents would push, but I don't know if Dusty May even has an agent. He didn't about a year ago. I do know that. I don't know if he's gotten one since. But either way, I don't feel like, I can't tell you, like, I don't feel confident in Dusty May because of the agent side. I know the agent side really pushed Muss hard a couple of months ago. And I wondered, maybe he's a realistic candidate and way out front. But it just seemed too good to be true too soon. And you can kind of tell when it's agent driven. With Dusty May, his name has always been lingering and lurking, and it's been on every single list. Eric Crawford's got him on there. Jody Dimling's got him on there. All these guys have him on there, and
all the national guys have talked
national
about
guys. Jeff Goodman, he was the first name on Jeff Goodman's list. I just find it funny, the perception too. I'm going to wrap it up with this because we need to get into the deep dive. But there are some platforms out there that do like coaching updates and spaces and this and that. And they do not like Louisville. They don't like our fans. They think we're entitled, high and mighty. And that's fine. But I'm just going to give some advice if they just stumble on this channel. Make sure, I think it's easy in some cases to get scoop and updates for smaller programs. I don't know, if Siena opened recently. I think that's going to be an easier thing to scoop. But with Louisville being a huge job, you're probably going to get 20 or 30 DMs a day if you're a big account from a big fan base. And a lot of that stuff's a bunch of crap. Yeah. And you've got to be able to sift through what is and what isn't, because I heard a couple different platforms last night kind of trashing our program, but then the things they were saying, I heard one of them say, Josh Hurd has too many people, trying to take control of this search, or he has too many people that are involved, and so it's not just his decision. That is just not true. It's flat out not true.
It's like the complete opposite.
It's the opposite. He's got a very small circle, a circle that he picked, and he's got the board of trustees and the president's backing from everything I've been told from people I absolutely believe in. And I heard other blasphemous things too. But I was just like, listen to this. I'm like, it just sounded to me like some people just don't like Louisville, and it's clouding their judgment on what's really happening here. And it's like, yeah, you've got a few fans that maybe think Scott Drew and Billy Donovan or bust. You got like a very fringe, small amount of people. But that is not defining our fan base. And regardless, it doesn't make it right to report things that are just nowhere close to being true. So then, like, when they then say, well, Dusty May's definitely going to Michigan, I'm just like, okay, we'll see, because you've already been wrong. I know what you've already been wrong about. So when you make a prediction like that, I don't have much faith in it, but we'll see. But I did want to get
to wrap or to restate what Kyle said here. Basically, he's gone and bookmarked a bunch of tweets so that this job he can shine the light on how wrong these people were.
No, and I'm not going to do that. Now,
I'm joking.
If Scott Drew would have taken it, I would have, because all you've heard is Louisville's not that great of a job. There has been program. You can't really flex with Dusty May as much as I've grown to like him, but you absolutely would be able to flex like crazy with Scott Drew, and I would have. You're right. I did have a couple bookmarks just in case, even though I never really thought that was going to happen. That being said, we are going to get into some Dusty May deep dive. We're 26 minutes in, which is a little longer than I thought before we got to this, but we did have some updates to go over. So I have Dusty May as our candidate number 2. That doesn't mean he is. That's what I think. And I could be wrong. And I will, this could all be for nothing, but I put in some work just getting to know Dusty May a little bit, some of his background, his upbringing, his offensive, his defensive philosophies, which I've watched a lot of their games, so I knew some of that already. But it's kind of good to really watch interviews, break things down, get an idea of who he is, just in case he is our coach. And I know some people have some concerns, some hesitancies, and we'll get into that as well. I want to present this stuff unbiased. I don't want to present it as like you should definitely get on board with Dusty or you should definitely not be on board with Dusty. I'll give my opinion, as we talk about it. I know, Pat, you will too. So with that being said, I just kind of wanted to get into this general resume. He has been the Florida Atlantic coach since 2018. His overall record is 126-68 for a 65% win percentage. Now that, in my opinion, is better than it looks on paper because of Florida Atlantic's history. They had a total of 5 winning seasons prior to his arrival, and he's had a winning season in all 6 of his seasons. And I think they've had a basketball program for over 30 years, but don't quote me on that. So the likelihood of them before Dusty May having a winning season was like once every 6 or 7 years. And then Dusty May comes in and he's had 6. Sorry. He's had 6 consecutive winning seasons. Some of those are like 17-15, 18-15. Not pretty, but he really had to build a program that had absolutely nothing. I mean, nothing as far as resources. He made the first Final Four in FAU history, last year. He formerly was a student manager under Bobby Knight from 96 to 2000. So while he was going to IU, which is where he spent most of his upbringing in Greene County, Indiana, we'll talk about that too. But he did that from 96 to 2000, so he got to learn under a Hall of Famer. He was an assistant coach at Eastern Michigan under Mike Davis, 2005-2006. He went to Murray State, 2006-2007. UAB from 2007 to 2009. Louisiana Tech after that to 2015. And then from 2015 to 2018, he was an assistant at Florida under Mike White. So his coaching tree, which is a big deal to me, coaching tree, Bobby Knight, I put asterisks by his because he does have some experience under Bobby Knight, but he was not an assistant coach. So he was doing things like preparing, game film for the coaches and, drawing like flashcards and stuff that he had ready. Just, helping out, but he wasn't like directly involved in the big decision making that an assistant coach would be. So I put asterisks there. He does have Mike Davis, Kerry Rupp, and Mike White. I am big on coaching trees, Pat. I don't know about you. As far as where you come from, I feel like coaches are more guaranteed to have success if they come from like a historical coaches coaching tree, at least one of them. I'm not really seeing it too much on here, if I'm being honest, but that is his coaching tree. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, I'm like you. I mean, the coaching tree is a big deal, especially here at Louisville. When you look at Denny Crum coached under, the greatest coach of all time. Rick Pitino came from some top-notch coaches, so we're kind of ingrained in that thought of who you learned under is a big deal. There's examples everywhere of people who didn't come from good coaching trees that ended up being good coaches, or guys that came from great coaching trees that ended up being bad coaches. So it's not the end all be all, but I think it is a big deal. And you look at this coaching tree and you've got some up and down guys on it. Obviously, Bobby Knight's a Hall of Famer, but like you said, while he probably learned a lot from Bobby Knight, he wasn't directly involved with like game planning and stuff that a normal assistant would be. Right. Mike Davis obviously had the highs of the first few Indiana years and then the lows. And the funny thing about Mike Davis, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Dusty coached under Mike Davis, not at IU, but at Louisiana Tech.
Yeah.
And
I think it was before Louisiana Tech. I think Louisiana State was under. He might have been there. I think Louisiana State. I'd have to look it up now. I wrote it down, but I didn't write down exactly who. Because Louisiana Tech was broken down, I believe, into Kerry Rupp and Mike White. So somebody in the comments, if they know, can correct me if I'm wrong.
Gotcha.
But I think that's where he joined Louisiana Tech. I don't think Mike Davis went there.
Well, yeah, I guess Mike Davis coached at UAB.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
So, and Mike Davis started out well, kind of fizzled out. Mike White had some good years in Florida and then obviously fizzled out at the end, which we'll get to later as it relates to Dusty May. Right. But yeah, no, I mean, I think the coaching tree is important. And to be honest with you, May's coaching tree scares me a bit.
Yeah.
But, again, that's one piece to the puzzle. That's probably if I had to, divide what I like into what I don't like. And with May, obviously that would be on the don't like side. But I think as we continue to go through this, there's going to be a lot of stuff that I've liked. And some of the stuff is stuff over the past few days as I kind of resigned, to the fact that May is probably the number 2 option that I've researched myself. And I've been like, wow, I didn't know that about him. That's a big plus. So.
All right. So we're going to move on to his personal life. A little bit about Dusty May. Obviously, we don't know every little thing. His favorite food. I actually looked that up, by the way. Dusty May, favorite food. Couldn't find it. If he's from Indiana, though, and as a fellow Hoosier, it's probably Tenderloin or Pizza King. That being said, he was born technically in Peoria, Illinois, but he moved to Greene County, Indiana at a young age. He does have one brother. He is married. He has 3 sons, Jack, Charlie, and Eli. Jack is a walk-on at Florida playing for their basketball team, and Charlie is a walk-on at UCF. And Eli is, I believe, a junior in high school this year. So he's not – I don't know if he'll be playing college ball somewhere, but it's a family of basketball. And he eats, breathes, lives, and sleeps basketball. That was one of my – if you remember, if you've been a long-time listener, you remember I had 4 criteria – for the next head coach, and one of them was that they're addicted to the game of basketball. The point that is damn near unhealthy because you have to be to make it in this town, in this city, where basketball takes precedence compared to other places. And I think we're going to figure out as we go through this, Dusty May is addicted to the game of basketball. He's 47 years old. So some interesting facts about Dusty May. He rides his bike to the facility every day. I don't think he'll be able to do that in Louisville for a few reasons, but weather being one of them. Boca Raton, they have a really nice weather year round. So he rides his bike to the facility. He doesn't drive very much to the facility. So I found that interesting. It's almost like he's competing with Jeff Brom. Like, you know what? You might drive an old Honda Accord, 2004 Accord, but guess what? I have a bicycle.
He's got those Teddy Bridgewater vibes, man.
Yeah. Yeah. So hobbies. Here, look at this man's hobbies. This is what I'm talking about. Addicted. This is literally where I found his hobbies. And this is the only hobbies I could find for Dusty May. Watching films, studying leadership. I should have added reading leadership books, and then going to the gym. So he watches game film all the time. He goes, I mean, he seems like he's obsessed with basketball. Another interesting fact about Dusty May, a lot of people have heard this story, but there may be some people that haven't. So Dusty May's first head coaching job was at Florida Atlantic, where he's at now. He didn't really know what he was doing, didn't have an agent, met with the athletic director, and took the job. It just seemed like a no-brainer. He's been an assistant. He's finally got a head coaching job. It's in Florida, which he was coaching at Florida at the time. So he's not like he has to move from Gainesville very far to get to Boca Raton. And it just seemed like, why would you say no? But what happened was he had not toured the facilities yet when he agreed to be the head coach. Rookie mistake. So he takes the job. And then I believe it was the next day that he went and toured the facilities, and it was dreadful. It was absolutely dreadful. There was hardly anything. It was a complete clusterfuck of a situation with the facilities or lack thereof. And he was so overwhelmed by the lack of resources when he realized what he did. I feel like in that moment, he realized he may have made a decision impulsively and too fast as a rookie, not knowing what to look for. You know, have you ever taken I don't know if you've ever taken a job as a brand new person in your career field or like an entry level position, and you really don't know what to look for yet. I feel like his first head coaching job, he didn't really know the questions to ask and the things to look for. So he went home that night and met with his wife and started bawling. And he told her that he committed career suicide by taking this job and wanted to find a way out of it. So then the next thing he did, from my understanding, reading his stories, was that he called Mike White, his old coach, and was like, hey, you know, if there's a spot for me, man, I'll come back. And apparently Mike White was like, Dusty, you got to go, man. Like, you can do this. And that's a pretty good recommendation there, because Mike White's best success at Florida was with Dusty May next to him. We'll get into that, like you said, later. But he could have easily been like, you know what? Let's just stick it out with what we had going on. He can find another job later. We'll let this thing ride at Florida again for another year or two. Yeah. He didn't do that. He saw in Dusty May, like, hey, you know, you're meant to be a head coach, man. Take this opportunity. You don't know when you'll get another one. You'll be fine. And talk Dusty May back into, you know, getting back on board and giving it a shot. And look where he got. You know, he got a Final Four last year, and he's back in the tournament as an 8th seed this year. So I found that story very interesting. I don't know about you, Pat.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, and you know, hindsight, Dusty's got to be thanking himself for taking that chance, thanking Mike White for telling him to take it, because look what it's turned into. It's turned into a Final Four, a at-large bid in a tournament for that school that facilities were, you know, trash when he got there. And now the opportunity, you know, whether he takes it or not, to get a big time job, whether it's here, Michigan, West Virginia, wherever. So luckily for Dusty, he had enough trust in himself or trust in Mike White's belief in him, that despite not doing the research on FAU, taking the job before he saw the facilities and saw what they had going on, he stuck with it. And, you know, it's ended up being the best move probably in his career to this point.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too when we think about this backstory. Obviously, the next level he goes to is a school like us, so there's not a ton of you can see Louisville's facilities, whether it's on TV or through online videos, which you probably can't through at FAU. You can do the same to Michigan, but it is interesting, what kind of background is he doing on the potential jobs that he's gonna be up for or take. And has he learned from that to really turn over every stone and make sure that, where he's going has all the things that he's going to want and need?
Well, Pat, I will say this. I don't know if he'll pick us, if he'll pick Michigan, pick somewhere else. I'm confident he'll pick us, but I could be wrong. But I can tell you this, he's not going to have the issue when he walks into our arena and our practice facility of wondering, like, where the hell the resources are.
Yeah.
I think if anything, he might get a little overwhelmed with the contrast. So
Yeah.
And that's something that, is a consideration. Is it too big? Is it easier to be low maintenance, low key? Some people prefer that. And I understand the down to earth coaching mentality of some of the best years, even people that become very successful will say some of their best memories were at those schools where he didn't have those kind of things. So I don't know, but I'm not too worried that he's going to be like, oh man, I don't know about the resources at Louisville right now. But one more fact, and then we'll move on to the next slide. I did want to say he did graduate from Eastern Green High School in Indiana. That is 20 minutes from Bloomington. So that's interesting. And his high school gym capacity was 2,800 seats, and FAU has a capacity of 2,900 seats. So 100 more seats in his current arena at his college, as a college job that he made a Final Four. They're in the tournament again this year. And Eastern Greene County is not a luxurious, fancy school at all. It's not a high maintenance. I live about 40 minutes away from that area, maybe 45 minutes. So I'm aware of the area. I mean, I didn't go there. I've never lived in the county, but it's not this, it's not like, oh, wow, that's actually not as bad because that's like a big, huge, fancy gym. No, it's not. Or at least it wasn't then. I don't know if it's changed in the last few years, but a few years ago, it certainly was not. So that's just an interesting little factoid about where he comes from, what kind of upbringing he was in, and then what he's, it's just kind of wild that Florida Atlantic, like what he's been able to do there.
Yeah.
Style of play, Pat. This is a big one. Oh, let me go back. Style of play. This is what I'm going to try to break down and make it make sense. So it's a tale of two different sides with Dusty May. Like, I really, really like what he's doing on offense right now. It's very innovative. It's a very modern NBA style, Nate Oates style type of offense. And, I actually might even like it a little bit more than Nate Oates' offense.
Yeah.
Weird as that sounds, but we'll get into that. So he runs a ball screen offense. All 5 players set screens, sometimes 3 or 4 screens in one offensive set. So nobody's exempt from setting screens. It's not like your big man sets a screen and he rolls towards the basket. Like, that's the old school mentality. They do a lot of flare screens, which is where a flare screen is where you have a screen that's set away from the ball in a passing lane. So like you have a guy, let's say you have a guy like on the left-hand side behind the arc, and there's a guy at the top of the key who doesn't have the ball. He may set a screen towards the top of the key and then roll towards the basket, or he may pop out for a 3. And then, you either do a skip pass to the 3, or you pass it down low, or, depending on the spacing, you may just take it yourself. But he does multiple flare screens at the same time. Like, he'll have a flare screen down low where he can make a decision there.
Yep.
Whoever has the ball. Or, he has somebody behind the arc at the same time setting a flare screen after screen after screen. He has plays out of bounds where he'll have 3 guys that line up like offensive linemen, and they'll all set a screen at the exact same time, and somebody will pop out, hit a 3. I mean, he has guys at FAU right now. He has a small lineup, which I think is hurting him on defense, but on offense, he has 4 ball handlers, and they all are at least decent shooters. Some of them a little bit better than others, but he has 4 guys who can create off the dribble and who can shoot the ball at least respectably and make the defense contest, which just opens up more spacing. And he prefers a big man who can make decisions with the ball and direct the offense. So he doesn't like a big man who just sits down there, gets the ball in the post, and backs his guy up and just throws it up. Now, Vlad Golden can do that, and there are times he's done that. But more often than not, when he gets the ball, he has like 3 or 4 different options. And of course, there's guys setting screens left and right. And he may pass it back off. He does a lot of high post entry guard exchanges where guard's going to get him the ball. He sets a pick, and he pops out in the paint, gets the ball, and then the guard, goes towards the basket, and he can either get the guard the ball back. If the 2 defenders go with the guard, then he can, initiate his own offense. There's a lot of different things he can do. And then, of course, depending on if there's a flare screen somewhere, he can skip it out to the corner for a 3. I've seen a lot of that. And so it's very interesting, very entertaining to watch. And the fact that he's got guys at Florida Atlantic that can do things that we have not had guys at Louisville be able to do in the last 3-4 years on offense, that is impressive. And so then that gets me to the defense. Actually, you know what? I'm going to before I do the defense, what are your thoughts on the offense, Pat?
So I've watched a lot of tape these past few days. I watched a few FAU games during the season. But when you're watching a game, you're not always breaking down the film and stuff. And I think you hit the main points here. It's a ball screen offense. What I'd like to add to that is when you think of a ball screen offense, and especially when you see a lot of this in the NBA, you see a lot of on-ball screens at the top of the key to initiate the offense. If that set doesn't work, you'll usually re-screen at the top to try it again. I think in this offense, you don't see that as much. It's more off-ball screens. There's not a lot of resetting of the play. And another thing you see a lot too is a lot of slip screens. You'll have the big guy come up and the screen is very quick. He doesn't even set the screen. He's immediately slipping to the basket. It's all very fast paced. It's not this methodical screen set. Yep. It's very quick. These screens are quick because the screener is immediately moving to an open space. So it's kind of like you're creating open space for the person you're screening for, but you're also creating space for yourself because of the constant movement. So you watch FAU basketball and you watch these breakdowns, and they get a lot of open shots, and it's not just open threes. And as you said, it's Nate Oates-like. It's a lot of shots in the key and a lot of shots from behind the arc. And they're usually open shots. The offense is honestly a beautiful offense. And the key to it is having the proper personnel, obviously. You need 4 ball handlers or 4 guys that can handle the ball. They don't need to be all point guards or anything like that, but 4 guys that can take people off the dribble. And of course, he typically has the one big man. He will go, when he doesn't have Golden in the game, he'll go to a smaller, more power forward type big man. And sometimes in that offense, he'll even go 5 out. Right. But yeah, no, it's a beautiful offense. A lot of cutting, a lot of movement. It's always filling in open space. The key to the offense is obviously creating as much space as possible and for people not to be bunched up in areas. That's not to say he doesn't have plays where he bunches to, create diversions and create, elevator screens and stuff like that. But typically you'll see the floor spaced at all times during his offense. And the picks are really quick because the guys are getting off those picks to go fill the space that is opened.
Yeah, so that's interesting because that's exactly what Dusty May in an article I read in The Athletic talked about. He said his offense is meant to do one of 2 things. You attack space that's there, if you don't have the space and you create the space, which is where all those multiple types of screens on and off ball occur in order to create space. So it sounds it's like, duh, you want space, but everybody wants spacing. It's how do you consistently create spacing? There's two main ways he does it. He has ball handlers all over the court who can shoot. So you have to respect their ability not only to shoot from behind the arc, but then you also have to respect their ability to drive right past you. They've got a big man who makes a lot of very intelligent decisions and has really elevated his game this year on the offensive end. Now, defense, we could talk about that. But on the offensive end, he's really elevated his game. He's a force down low. They're a force to be reckoned with on offense. And so that's how they have all those elements, and then they set all those on and off ball screens that we talked about. And that creates a ton of space. So it's really, really hard to guard Florida Atlantic. It is really hard.
Yeah. Well, and from a viewer standpoint too, it's fun to watch. And honestly, offensively, it's probably going to be the most entertaining offense we've had in a long time. There were some Rick teams that were really entertaining offensively, but Rick was known for his pressure defense and stuff. These teams are going to be fun to watch. One other thing I want to hit on before you get to defense is another big aspect of his offense is getting out in transition. Because he's got four guys that can handle the ball on the court, you'll usually see almost like a Russell Westbrook type of rebounding system where their big guy is blocking out. And I'm not saying he's not trying to get the rebound, but if there's the opportunity for him to block out and let one of the ball handlers get the rebound so that they can push the ball up the court, because having a ball handler get the rebound initiates the offense quicker.
Right.
They get a lot of transition buckets off of rebounds because of that. So they're flying up and down when they get those type of rebounds. And that's another big part of his offense. You know, we kind of talked about the half court offense, but they've got a really good transition offense too. And again, spacing is key in the offense. How he looks and teaches is, hey, when you see the rebounder taking it up the court, fill in the spaces. Don't necessarily everybody go to the corner. You know, if there's space in the wing area, fill in the wing. If a guy's taking the ball down the wing, fill in the middle. Sounds like basic concepts, but they do a really good job.
I did want to get into the defense because that's where they've struggled, and they've struggled every year except really last year. So they do something called drop coverage defense, which is meant to force shots off the dribble. What happens is when they set especially a ball screen day as in the offense, what Florida Atlantic likes to do, and it's an NBA style of defense, is they like to have the guy guarding the screener drops in coverage. And what happened, or actually not the guy, the guy guarding the screener drops back in coverage, usually a big man like Vlad Golden. He drops back in coverage, and the person that's defending the ball goes through the screen and then, tries to catch up because you're going to get behind the screener, and you try to pursue back and get back into the play and force a bad shot off the dribble, because off the dribble shots have a lower percentage of being converted. It worked last year, but this year teams are making 4% better on off the shots off of the dribble. So what you really are trying to do when you do these drop coverages, you're trying to get your big man to stay down low to keep people from penetrating the lane, which makes sense because FAU has a small lineup. They're a very small team other than Vlad Golden. And even he's not overly huge. It's just they've got a small team. So what you don't want to do is create lanes and angles for bigger teams to get that can give them offensive rebounding advantage. That's a big part of the, drop coverage defense. But the big thing is, it's a lot of times, especially in FAU's case, it's really hard for the guy that's guarding the ball on those screens to keep up with the guy that has the ball. Usually the guy gets around him, and there's too much space between him and the guy that drops, which is usually, like I said, Vlad Golden, and it gives them easier shots. And I've seen teams really exploit that ball coverage defense because Vlad Golden's the guy they pick out, and they're like, they're going to drop him back, and you're going to, build up a bunch of momentum because he's so far back, and you're going to blow right past him with speed, or you're going to like pull up and take a shot off the dribble, which is what they want, but you still have to contest it pretty well. The guy who's chasing the screen has to get back into the play. The problem I see is that takes a whole lot of effort, and I haven't seen the effort that you have to pull that off. Now, in the NBA, you see that type of defense a lot, but the NBA is different because everybody is an incredible offensive players. So there's defenses that work in college that just aren't going to work in the NBA because you got the best players in the world at every single position on offense. And nobody that makes it in the NBA is getting drafted for their defense. That's something they develop later. So they draft based on offense. So that whole idea of implementing that in college, the players typically don't have the athletic ability to continuously do that. Now, they do have a little bit of pressure defense, like in the backcourt whenever, teams are inbounding it. They do a little bit of that sometimes to try to speed up tempo, to try to get some turnovers and deflections. But their big thing is that drop coverage defense, and I just don't think it's working well for them at all this year. I don't know what you think, Pat.
Yeah, I think when you talk about that drop coverage concept, I think you see the difference this year in their defense and I guess how well it worked last year compared to this year. I think a big reason for that is the step up in competition. When you're facing better players, better athletes, your drop coverage is going to crumble a little bit more because you've got better shooters off the dribble when you're facing better teams. You've got more, better ball handlers, people that can break you down better. So I think that step up from Conference USA to the American can kind of explain that. Their out of conference schedule was hard, but also this is what another thing that scares me, and I think where Dusty's going to have to adapt, because I don't know if that defense, especially with the players he has now. Now, of course, he's hopefully going to recruit a different caliber player at U of L, but I don't see that defense working in the ACC consistently. For this to work, you need athletic perimeter defenders that can chase and recover incredibly well. And you mentioned the NBA, and drop coverage is a big defensive strategy in the NBA, but you'll often see teams that use it that don't have good perimeter defenders are getting absolutely abused. They're getting beat off the dribble. Yep. There's a lot of spot up threes off the dribble. So you've got to have good perimeter defenders. And I haven't watched FAU enough to know if their perimeter guys just aren't good enough on defense. But it's something that does worry me that I think Dusty will have to look at or recruit differently to make sure it works at this level.
I did want to say thank you, Trent, for the $2 donation. He says, happy 34th birthday to my Pookie Bear Ty. I think he had a few years there, but Ty Elliott, who normally is on here, and he may be on here when he gets home from work. He may pop in, but it is his birthday. So thank you very much, Trent. We appreciate the $2 donation. That being said, we are going to kind of get into offensive and defensive efficiency, which complements our last piece. So the trends I noticed on offense, 2019, he takes over a completely, let's just say, broken program. I don't even know if it's broken because I don't know if it was ever to the point where it was put together. He just didn't have any resources at all. Takes over this program, 269th in offensive efficiency in 2019, 82nd in defense, which isn't great, but as you can see, that's actually the second best defensive efficiency he's had. So in 2020, his offense goes up to 217, 2021, 168, 2022, it goes up to 131, 2023 goes up to 27, and then 2024 this year, it's up to 22nd. So his offensive efficiency continues to climb. And that just shows a guy who's getting his guys in there. He's adapting. I know there was an article I read where he actually called Nate Oates once and was like, hey, what is it that you're doing so well? Because, I'm struggling a little bit on offense, and I'm looking for pointers, and I really like the way your offense works. What is setting your offense apart from what I'm doing? And Nate Oates told him it was added flare screens. Like, if you add a lot more flare screens than what you're doing now, it's going to help. And that's where a lot of flare screens we talked about earlier are coming from. And that's the thing about Dusty May. He will reach out to anybody that he thinks can give him advice and help him grow. He's not afraid to admit where he's struggling, and he will absolutely reach out and work to get better. That gets me to the defensive trends. It just isn't good. Like, all of the defenses are hovering around 150, except for last year and his first season. His first season was 82nd, which is not great. Last year was pretty good, especially considering, a 27th best offense as far as offensive efficiency and the 40th ranked defensive efficiency. You can do good damage with that, and they did. They lost 4 games and went to the Final Four. I think it was 4 games. Don't quote me on that. But they had a really good year. But this year, their entire struggle has been that their defense has dramatically dropped off. And, I've probably watched 12 or so games of theirs because I've been tracking Dusty May for a long time, thinking he was a realistic high-up candidate. And it's been a struggle, man. We talked about the drop coverage, so I'm not going to get too much back into that. But more than anything, Pat, I just want to say these numbers reflect what we said. Yeah. I don't think now maybe when you come to Louisville, here's what my solution would be if he's our next head coach. Get a defensive-minded assistant and get the athletes, get taller players that, because a lot of his defense is because of how short his team is. Like, he's got to clog those rebounding lanes, which is why the drop coverage helps with the big sagging down low on those ball screens. It keeps him down in the paint instead of switching on those screens like you see like a no middle defense do among other defenses. You see zone defenses do it. Like, if you over pursue, which is Dusty May's logic, if you over pursue, then you're going to end up, not being in position to get a good rebound, especially with a shorter team, a smaller team. So his solution has been this, drop coverage defense. And I'm hoping if he comes here and is able to recruit better players, he can maybe switch up the defense. And I know that's a lot to ask for right off the bat, to switch defenses entirely. And maybe he just adds to the drop coverage. Maybe it's something he doesn't rely on. He still uses in situations, but that he mixes it up with other defenses. But I really would hope he would get a defensive coach in here and get players that can run a more adaptable defense to the kind of offenses we're seeing in today's game.
Yeah. I think, you hit on everything there. The one thing I will add here is I'm an efficiency nut, so I like looking at coaches and their efficiency histories. And a lot of the times when I'm looking at coaches that have made the jump from a mid-major program to the P6 level, the successful coaches usually continue to be successful in that area, because usually when you're at a mid-major level, you're specialized in either offense or defense. You don't see a ton of mid-major coaches that have extremely good offensive and defensive efficiency numbers. So typically the coaches that succeed, if they're good at offense, their offense remains good, and they obviously step it up defensively. And usually it's a slow burn up. It's usually not immediately, but by year 2, year 3, your defense is at a better level than it was when you're at the mid-major level. And obviously the coaches that don't succeed, this is all self-explanatory, usually take a step back in the category they were good at and remain bad in the category that they weren't good at. So it will be telling in the first few years, I think. Does that offensive efficiency remain, which I'm pretty confident it will, watching FAU's offense. But the step to being a great P6 coach is taking that great offense and combining. You don't have to always have a great defense with the great offense, but you got to have a respectable defense.
Yes. And that's what separated them last year.
Yeah. Yep. And ranking 133, 150, that's not respectable. So it's got to take that step up for us to, be consistently making the second weekend and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I am going to move it along here to the next part, which is achievements. So we talked about some of these, so it overlaps, but he has had a winning record in all 6 seasons at FAU. That is wrong. It should say only 5 winning season FAU history. I forgot. I edited it on one of the first slides I did, but I forgot to edit on that one. So that should say only 5 winning seasons in FAU history prior to Dusty's tenure. So a winning record, I mean, obviously we're not going to be happy at Louisville going, hey, we went 17-15. Now maybe next year, I would next year after everything we've been through, I would take that next year and then immediately expect a tournament bid by year 2. And that's whoever the coach is going to be. But, saying, okay, he's had 6 winning seasons in a row, big whoop-de-doo, but you have to consider where FAU was when he took over. So I actually think that's a really good accomplishment. And obviously now he's making the tournament in consecutive years. So that's good. He was the CUSA Coach of the Year in 2023. He made a Final Four last year, obviously. He had 2 2023 first-team all-conference players in John L. Davis and Elijah Martin, and 1 2023 third-team guy, Vlad Golden, so the big guy. And I think he should be first-team this year, although I admittedly don't know who the other bigs are in the conference. I just can't imagine they're having much better season than him, especially down the stretch. So he's really developed his game. John L. Davis has taken the next step. So individual player development, at least on the offensive end, has improved. That's another thing I could have added in here, but I didn't know how to really quantify that. I guess I could have done like points per game and rebounds per game, but that also doesn't always tell the tale. And I also added this in here. When Mike White was at Florida, I don't know if people remember, but I think it was back when Chris Mack took the job, Mike White's name came up a bit as somebody kind of like how Golden does now at Florida. Like we were all like, what about Mike White? He's a young guy. He might be a good guy to bring on because at the time he had went 27-9, reached the Elite 8, and then he went 21-13, which isn't great, but decent. And he reached the second round at Florida, both of those years back to back. And all of a sudden, like nothing more really happened. I think he had 4 more seasons, Mike White did, and that was when Dusty took off to Florida Atlantic. And I think he made a tournament in 2 of those 4 years. He never really built upon what he had. I don't remember if it was a 27-9 year or a 21-13 year that we were really looking at him. I think it probably was a 27-9 year. I don't remember exactly when we hired Chris Mack the year. I get confused on all that unless I sit down and really look at it. I know it was one of those 2 years, but I always kind of thought, man, Mike White really fell off. I'm kind of glad we didn't hire him after all. But I never connected the dots, Pat, that Dusty May was there during their most successful years and then took off. And maybe that's just coincidence. I'm not going to say like that's what happened and that's why he didn't succeed at Florida and had to go to Georgia. But it's possible. It's definitely possible because Florida's offense looked a lot better, especially that 2016-2017 year. And I haven't seen anything there or since at Georgia that makes me think it's ever returned to that for whatever reason.
No, yeah, I agree with you. I think when you look at like a basketball coaching, especially from like an X's and O's standpoint, I don't think basketball assistants have as big of an impact as like a defensive coordinator at a football school. But I think there's definitely some impact there. I mean, you look across the country, Mick Cronin, who was the guy he lost?
Michael Lewis. He lost
Michael Lewis
from Ball State.
Michael Lewis left and
he's had a drop.
Has kind of gone down. You look even at Baylor with Scott Drew, Jerome Tang leaves and their defense isn't as good as it used to be. So,
and your boy McCaslin.
Yeah, and McCaslin.
He's going to come up a couple times.
When you look at these guys who are assistants that are then successful head coaches, I think it's evident that the drop off is maybe not totally because of them, but they played some impact into why, Florida, Dusty May played a big impact into why Florida was really good. And there was naturally a drop off when he left. I don't think that's, saying something out of line. It's probably not the whole story, but it definitely is a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. So I did want to clarify one more time that it was actually 5 winning seasons before, and I forgot to edit on that one part. So my bad there. Nick, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, congrats to Ty on being Trent's Pookie Bear. Ty, again, referring to Ty Elliott, whose birthday it is, getting nothing but shade in the comments, which that's just how we are, like all of us that are in that group chat together. So that being said, we're going to move it right along past the achievements. Quotes from other coaches and players. I always find this interesting. I don't know about you. So this is from Mike White, who Dusty May was an assistant coach for at Florida, at Louisiana Tech, or Lafayette, whichever one it was. He said he doesn't think he has it all figured out. Dusty will spend an hour with anyone just talking hoops. Hell, it could be a junior high coach. Dusty's going to tell him everything he does. Then he's going to say, what are you doing? And he's going to try to learn from him. So I use that quote because to me, that just tells me he's humble. He doesn't think he has it all figured out, and he's always trying to learn. And after what we've dealt with here, it's not to compare, but I do, you don't forget. I feel like we came off of a situation where our coach didn't take advice from anybody, and maybe he did behind the scenes, but we certainly didn't know about it. I never knew Kenny Payne to be a guy that was like, what do you think we should do? It was more like, just leave me alone. I've got it all figured out. I don't think if Dusty May's our next coach, we're going to have a problem with Dusty being like, I don't have anything more to learn. I've got it all figured out, and it's just the players need to change. That's just not in his DNA. And I've read enough articles. I've seen player quotes about him, all the players he had return at FAU, which I should have listed that under achievements as well. But long story short, he just seems like a guy who's very humble and always trying to figure out how to be better every single day. I don't know, Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not just basketball coaches, but in any profession, if you are not constantly trying to learn and trying to figure out what the next step is, how can I get better? It doesn't matter if you're on the top of your profession. Somebody under you is learning how to get better. So you've got to continue to learn how to get better. And I think, you sent this quote earlier today, and I started looking up stuff about Dusty and what people said. And Mike White said this, but there were many other people that said the same thing. I think there is a similar quote from Brad Stevens. And it just shows that this guy is a basketball junkie, for one, and he's constantly looking for ways to improve. And it doesn't matter if he's good at what he's doing right now. Like, his offense is good, but from what I've read, he's constantly looking at new ways to get more open guys, to get better shots, to initiate new plays. And I think that's what you want in a coach, right? You want a guy that's constantly working and constantly looking at ways to innovate his offense and defensive schemes.
Absolutely. So we're going to head on to the next quote here. This is from Pat. You've got a couple of Grant McCasland quotes in here, and I'll tell you what, I had more too. Every time I looked up stuff about Dusty May, this coach right here, who Pat loves, Grant McCasland, current Texas Tech coach in his first year.
Love me
very good coach. At least he appears to be very good up and comer. He's had success everywhere he's been. Pat, you could ramble on about him all day, but this is the Dusty May show. So we're going to keep it about that. But he said that group, he said this about Dusty's team, Florida Atlantic last year. He said that group, you can tell, is connected to winning. They're not connected to playing good individually. They're connected to winning. And what that tells me is Dusty is able to provide a vision for his team to come together for a greater good than just their personal selves, which is everybody says that. Like everybody says, yeah, it's a team game. We're team players. Very few people live by it. When the going gets tough, a lot of people tend to react by looking out for their own interest, and that's no different in sports. You see a lot of players, a lot of coaches, even, and we saw it here with our staff, with KP. I'm just going to be honest. When the going got tough, we call out people individually, and it just seemed like everybody was doing their own thing. But a quote like this from a coach who I know you respect, Pat, and I think is a really good coach, tells me that Dusty can figure out how to get a team to play together. Now, obviously, with the portal and NIL, that changes every year. So it may be harder some years than others, but it tells me he at least has the ability to get a group of guys and get them on the path to see a vision that is greater than just their individual selves, see how they individually play a part in the greater good, and then together can reap the benefits. What do you think?
Yeah, and I'll tell you from, as you said, I'm a big Grant McCasland fan, and knowing his background and reading various articles on Grant, this is the ultimate compliment from him, because his philosophy, and it's most coaches' philosophies, as you said, is being connected and thinking about winning and not what you are doing individually. He preaches it all the time in practice. So by him saying, hey, I watch these guys and they are what I want to be. This is what I want my teams to be. And I see it in their team. I mean, that's the ultimate compliment from a guy who I think is a great up and coming coach like Dusty. So yeah, no, I think it shows the respect he has from his peers that are all on the same level as him. I mean, if I had to predict and hope, especially if Dusty's going to be our coach, these two guys, Grant and him, are going to be, two of the top 10 to 15 coaches of that generation that's coming up. So hearing something like that from Grant McCasland obviously is a big plus in Dusty's book for me.
All right. And we'll do one more from Grant McCasland. I actually had 3, and I was like, you know what? We can't just make this a Grant McCasland quote show. So I only use another one, but
you wouldn't get me to shut up, man, if you put another one in.
Grant McCasland also said he's never one to talk about what they're doing. He's one to ask how to do things better. He's always searching and trying to improve, which just goes back to the first quote from Mike White. It's like he's driven to just continue to grow. He's never satisfied. That is something that we have to have in a basketball coach. And I think the reason I share that is because I think there's this perception maybe that Dusty May's just kind of coasting down there at FAU because the expectations are lower and there's not as much pressure, and that maybe he wouldn't like a job like Louisville because of the pressure. And he might not. I don't think that's the case, but I mean, it's possible. But it shows me that he's relentlessly trying to improve. He's driven, and I don't think it's going to be as big of a problem. I think he would look at coming here as a positive challenge. Like, how can I grow and take that next step at a perennial blue blood program, a top 10 program of all time? And when I say blue blood, I know people get wound up, other fan bases. I'm talking about like perennial, like outside of your 6 or so. We're in that next group with Michigan State and IU and those programs. We're not going to go down that route. I'm just saying, like, I don't think he would look at this job and its prestige as something that intimidates him. I think it would be an opportunity to grow and get better. And this is just one more quote that reflects that.
Yeah, and I don't want to rehash what I've already said, but I think the important thing here is Dusty seems to have that drive that you need to be great. And I'm not sure that our last coach had that. And even going back to Mac, I'm not sure he had that drive after the COVID situation. And I just think it's extremely important, and all the successful coaches out there, all the all-time greats, have that drive of I've got to constantly be studying film. I've got to constantly be getting better. And so to hear this from other coaches gives me, the confidence that Dusty has at least that aspect to try to be a great coach. And that's what you want when you look at coaches that you want leading U of L. So I think all these quotes kind of, point to good qualities that are needed, not just for a college basketball coach, but for a college basketball coach at this program.
Yeah. So real quick, before I go to the next quote, I did want to say, with a lot of people in here right now on multiple platforms, please like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, if you're not following our YouTube channel yet. Also, follow our Twitter page, The Third Banner. So, make sure you keep updated with what we're doing. We'd love to have as many people as we can. Just get to know what our pod is about. We've been doing this about a year now, so we're still pretty new at it, but we're rolling right along. I think the content, at least some people seem to really enjoy it. So if you're one of those people and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. That being said, we're going to keep moving right along, Pat. This one here is FAU player Elijah Martin, who's one of their better players. He returned again this year. In the offseason, there was a lot of speculation that players were going to enter the portal because FAU just went to the Final Four, and it's freaking FAU. So I'm just saying, nobody would be surprised if these guys all left FAU high and dry. Now, if you would have told me beforehand, I would have guessed maybe 2 or 3 of them would have left, maybe 4 of them, and the rest would have came back. None of them left. They all came back. They had one player that left the team who graduated and had no more eligibility left. That's it. So that was incredible. That's just absolutely incredible that he was able to retain them. And so what Elijah Martin had said was, quote, either he was going to leave and bring us with him, or he was going to stay and we're going to run it back. Now, I bring this quote up because if he's going to be our next head coach, I hope Elijah Martin still feels that way, because I think Elijah Martin is a really good player, and I think he would be a good player for us to have in this program. And if there's others on the team that feel that way, that are contributing, they got some dudes. Like I heard a few people criticize, could this guy compete in the ACC? Could that guy compete in the ACC? There's at least 3 or 4 of these guys that most certainly could. The ACC is very down, for one. I mean, John L. Davis, I don't know if he'll go NBA. He tested the water, so did Elijah Martin. But if those 2 guys come back again, if you can get them enough NIL, you absolutely bring guys like that. And Vlad Golden, their big guy, oh, man, he's got all the offensive footwork, decision-making, and ability to be an instant impact big here. Now, I know Brandon Huntley Hatfield's here, so I don't know if he'll stick around if Dusty May's a coach. I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'd love to keep Brandon Huntley Hatfield. But if he does leave, he can get Vlad Golden, or I don't know if you can move Brandon Huntley Hatfield to the 4, which he's played in the past, and then put Vlad at the – just thinking about that makes me go crazy, because Brandon Huntley Hatfield can hit the 3 too. So it's not like he has to just never float out to the top. I'm not saying he needs to make a living out there, but he can create some space with that. He hit a few 3s this year. And I say all that just to say, this quote here tells me, they were all – I believe it, because they all stayed with him. They probably had higher NIL amounts they could have gotten at bigger schools, and they chose to stay at FAU. So I absolutely believe these guys would have upped and left with him, Pat.
Oh, I agree. And I think – one of the big question marks for Dusty from everybody, even the most positive Dusty guys is going to be, can he recruit at the next level? He hasn't gotten a top 100 guy. His player development is obviously great. His talent evaluation must be good. But can he recruit at the next level? I'm not sure this quote answers that question directly. But I think what this quote does answer in the NIL era is Dusty's going to be good at retaining players in this, in the NIL era. And that's huge. You've got guys that are leaving programs every year. And if you have a coach whose players like him enough at FAU to pass up bigger NIL opportunities at other schools, he's going to be extremely successful at being able to keep rosters together, which is huge in this era of basketball. So I think this is a great quote to show that. Does it show that he's going to be able to go out there and get top 100 recruits? No, but it does show that when he has good players on his team, he's going to be able to do everything he can to keep them here.
There's the birthday boy, Ty. Ty, you've gotten a couple of donations just for your birthday. I don't know if you saw
really? I didn't even.
Yeah.
I was driving home. I didn't even see that. That's
Trent
awesome.
called you Pookie Bear, and also Nick's in here, and he also donated. But happy birthday to Ty. But Ty, we're just to kind of catch you up. We've been really going through all this deep dive into Dusty May, and we're on the quotes now. So this was just kind of a proof that players probably would go with him if he leaves, unless they go pro. So we'll go to the next one, though. We'll go to the next one, and we'll kind of all give our input that way. But this one is, again, from Mike White, and I love this quote. This is, again, he worked for Mike White at a couple of different places. Last place was Florida when Mike White was a head coach there before Dusty left for FAU. His quote about Dusty was, quote, "He lives it, he eats, sleeps, breathes it. He's consumed with it. There are no lulls. If you are a normal human being, and I most certainly am, he's an alien. You have a lull. You have an off day. I've never seen one of those with him ever. We could get beat by 20 or win by 20. He's going to be the same dude in the office the following morning, probably up before anyone else." And that just told me, like, there's certain dudes, and there's not a whole lot of this, and I've seen multiple quotes like this. This is the one I picked because it broke it down, and Mike White admits himself, I am not like that. He's a head coach, and he's like, I am not like Dusty. I don't have that in me. And if you remember on my deep dive into like 6 head coaches, I had 4 criteria, and one, embraces the limelight, which you may have to question that. I don't know if he does or not. The second one, or one of them, was like tournament runs and history of winning. He had the tournament run last year. We'll see what he does this year, despite having a really tough bracket. But one of them was being addicted to the game of basketball to the point where it consumes your life and you just like are obsessed with it. This tells me he is, because it doesn't matter if he gets beat by 20 or wins by 20. He's the same dude, which tells me that while his goal is to win, it's not like he is not going to be the kind of guy that's going to like have a few losses and then just totally like get dejected and lose his fire. His fire appears to be driven by the love of the game, which is very hard to find. Very hard to find that. You can find even good coaches that don't have that, but you can rarely find coaches that are good that also have that. And that's what can make them great.
Right.
Yeah, I think, and I kind of hit on this on a couple quotes ago, but if I'm looking at a personality aspect, I'm not talking about X's and O's or recruiting. A personality aspect, my like must for a U of L coach is that you have to be tirelessly working. You have to want it and constantly want it. That's what made Rick Pitino successful. That's what made Denny Crum successful. That's what makes all the great coaches successful, is you've got to eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, as Mike White said about them. So, again, these are obviously cherry-picked quotes of the good stuff, and people aren't going to talk negatively about guys that were on their staffs, but you don't hear this about everybody. And when Mike White's saying, hey, I'm not like this, but he is, that's pretty telling. And it's a quality. If I had looked retrospectively, even a week ago, I was very wishy-washy with Dusty May. And I'm not saying that I don't still have questions about him, but after reading up on him, after reading some of Kyle's research these past couple days, I think the one thing that's been answered for me that is a big theme when I look at these coaches is he's got the drive, and I won't have to worry about him taking a Sunday off or as Kyle said, getting so down after a win that he's like, man, I give up. I can't put this much work into it anymore. He's consumed by the game and consumed by getting better. And that's what you have to have quality-wise as a great coach.
All right. So we're going to get to that might be the last slide. Okay. That is the last slide. So that's all the quotes. Let me get us switched up on here to back to 3-person.
While you're doing that,
Why is it not looking right? All this has changed. Let me get that out of there. Why can't I make a classic? Why are we so small? Ash,
what
tell me why.
about that? How about
there
that?
we go. Good job. Never mind,
I
Ash.
fix
We
it.
don't need you. You'll have to tell me afterwards how you did that. But I'm going to get into more as well on Dusty May. That's not it. That's just the slides. But go ahead, Ty.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm just now looking at the chat, and I'm seeing Larry, Robert, Couch House, Desmond, JV. Like, thank you guys for all the birthday wishes. Thank you all for tuning in all the time. You guys are loyal listeners to us, and a lot of you guys have been here from the start. So thank you guys. Seriously, thank you for tuning in. And I
All
saw
Ty
Trent.
wants for his birthday is likes and subscriptions.
That's all I want, really. And then I see Trent and Nick with the super chats. Thank you guys. Seriously, thank all of you. I woke up today 30 years old, and I'm not gonna lie, I felt it. So thank you all. And I want to say, Kyle, you did a great job in putting all this together, man. We're gonna continue, like, if Dusty really is the hire, which it seems like a lot of the signs are pointing that way, we're gonna be putting out more content, revolving around Dusty and things like that. So this was a great start and a lot of good information.
So some things I didn't include that I want to talk about, like Dusty. One interesting thing about Dusty May, he obviously learned as a student manager in a Bobby Knight, but he tried to take on that temperament, that personality, that in your face, screaming and yelling and, scaring the fear of God into his players. And it didn't really work for him. As an assistant, he tried to be the tough guy who was just like tearing people down. It didn't work. And so I know a lot of people kind of get nervous about that. Like, oh, he's one of those pushover players coaches. No, that's not what happened, actually. So what Dusty ended up doing is when he would come back into town, because, he's from Greene County, Indiana, he would actually sneak into Brad Stevens' practices while Brad Stevens was at Butler and watch what Brad Stevens was doing. And he actually really watched Brad's temperament. And we all know Brad Stevens, if he would have stayed in college, I have no doubt he'd have multiple championships right now. None. He took Butler. It's one thing to have one run. He took them 2 out of 3 years. 2 years out of a 3-year span to the runner-up, and was a rimmed out half-court shot from winning a championship over Duke. That I think it was Duke.
Yep.
And then,
Duke, yeah.
And I know they played another year too. And so that like what he picked the right guy to follow, and he really was impressed with Brad Stevens' temperament. Picked up a lot of things from Brad, and I wouldn't say he picked up his defense quite yet, I will be honest. But as far as temperament and how to lead and how to run a team, he realized that kind of style was better suited for him. And that's just one more example of him being able to adjust. And I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but he had called Nate Oates. I think I did, but I'm going to say it again. Nate Oates, he runs a tremendous offense. He has since Buffalo. He took it to Alabama. But when he was struggling, when Dusty May was struggling, he reached out to Nate Oates and talked to him. Reached out, called him, and said, well, what are you doing that works so well? And started adding that stuff to what he does. So I really think he's the kind of guy, if he comes to Louisville, he's going to look – I could picture Dusty May reaching out to the community, picking brains of people around here. What is Louisville basketball like? If he's not already – well, I doubt he's already done it because it would kind of show his hand while he's at FAU. But I have no doubt that if he takes this job, he's going to, like, really try to immerse himself, understand the in and outs, the history of our program, and really work on some of the things he needs to do in order to recruit the portal really well, which is important here. NIL, which is something he really hasn't had much of. They do have a collective at FAU, which he helped start. And it's for FAU, it's doing pretty well considering it had absolutely nothing, but it's going to be nothing like the 502 circle and private NIL deals he can get. It's just not even in the same ballpark. So I think he's going to pick people's brains about that kind of stuff. And you just hear all these stories about how he reaches out and really follows people, supervises them. He reads leadership book after leadership book. Like they say, he's obsessed with doing that, which just tells me he's always looking for new ways to approach his players. There's a great article in The Athletic for this year. There was one last year as well, which I've talked about a lot. But there's one this year written, I think, like 7 or 8 days ago, where he breaks down the struggles of bringing a team back that now has expectations and how expectations can be the root of all evil because they can drive people to be different. He talks about everything he's tried to do in order to, meet with players individually that he wasn't meeting with individually as much and realizing how much that's helping them, getting to the gym even earlier before their workouts than he already was, just so he could, gouge the mood of the team and figure out things and, figure out if they're having a bad day or if the vibe seems off, what's going on, like getting there even earlier. He realized he could like fix a lot of things in order to start the practices and workouts on a good note. And it was a really impressive read. I don't remember just search Dusty Mady Athletic, and it was about 8 or 9 days ago. And he talks about how the expectations and the things he's had to do with this team in order to keep them focused and some of the challenges that he has this year that he didn't last year. He just strikes me as a guy who I've been on the fence about in some ways, but he strikes me as a guy who's going to be a lot more driven to succeed and willing to learn than anything we've had recently. I'll put it that way.
So you make a lot of great points there, and this is kind of me teasing in the future when I say this, but I too have been kind of like trying to do my research on Dusty and kind of figure it out. And through my research, when I was looking up like philosophies and offensive style, I ran across a YouTube channel called Basketball Immersion, and they had a lot of good stuff on Dusty, and they have a podcast that they've done with him. And I reached out to the owner of the YouTube channel and kind of talked to him, and he had nothing but great things to say. And he actually pointed me in the direction of the podcasts that he did with Dusty. And part of that like tease that I was talking about is I think Friday night we're going to run a little YouTube video of showing some of those plays and film breakdown. But to the point I was trying to make, when I watched a lot of those podcasts about Dusty, he talked a lot after the Final Four or like during that Final Four run of how he reached out to so many different people to try and, just learn anything, to take in any bit of information. And when he said he reached out to Brad Stevens and even to the minute details of like, should I change, how should I handle, getting him prepared to shoot in a big dome and, and just day to day, the process of, like throughout the day before the game, it shows me that he's very, like you said, I think Kyle or Pat said it, maybe he's humble. He wants to continue learning. He doesn't think that his way is the highway. He wants to learn and do better. And he leans a lot on his players. I know he talks to his players a lot, gets their opinions on things, coaches. He's going to be driven. And I do agree. I think he's going to be able to, if he is the hire, he's going to immerse himself with the city. And I think fans will, even if you're skeptical on some things, I think fans will flock to that personality, that humbleness, the drive. They're gonna fall in love with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much for me to add to that. I think as someone who admittedly was a Dusty skeptic, and not all my questions have been answered. I think when you go through a coaching search as a fan and certain people rise to the top, you start as a hardcore fan, which I'd like to believe I am. You start to research those people. And over the past few days, I think there have been things I've found out about Dusty that have been presented tonight that have calmed my nerve. I think the tireless work ethic, the constantly trying to learn and innovate are big things for me, and things that are big pluses when I look at my positives and negatives for Dusty. I think his basketball acumen, his X's and O's, especially from an offensive standpoint, are another big positive. The defense needs to improve, but the fact that he's always trying to get better and asking questions, and it's not just asking questions of the top coaches in basketball, as some of these quotes pointed to. Dusty's the type of guy that could go into a high school game, watch the game, see something that he likes, and ask the high school coach, what were you doing there? What's the game plan there? I like that. I want to learn what you're doing. So, and to that leader ability, that's to me, when I look at leaders, I think that's one of the biggest qualities is you're not always looking at what your peers and the people above you are doing, but you're looking at what the younger guys and the people who are below you on the totem pole are doing and learning from them too. So do I still have questions that, can't be answered from the stuff that I research? Sure. I still need to see Dusty be able to recruit at this level. I still need to see that defensive improvement. I think things point to him immersing himself well into this community, but I need to see what he's going to do even when he gets this job. He needs to obviously do things different than KP did in terms of, getting a running start and really connecting with the fan base and getting them to buy season tickets and getting them back out to the Yum in year one.
I think he would.
And I think he will. I think everything points to that. Those are the things I still need to see. But yeah, the stuff I've read on him, I mean, it's pretty incredible stuff. And it gives you confidence that those question marks that you have, or that I have at least, it leads me to believe that he has the qualities to answer those in a positive way.
And
it's hard not to be impressed, right?
Yeah. I have a goal. I'll say it. And if it doesn't happen, that's fine. He's a busy man. And if he takes his job, he's going to be very busy. But I have seen enough things on him now, enough guest intros on podcasts to know that he will go on a podcast.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I'm going to shoot my shot. I don't know. I mean, it might be a broke shot. It might be like Westbrook in his 30s shooting threes, but I'm going to shoot the shot anyway.
The famous Nick
he's
Young
the kind of dude that
gif.
would do it.
The Nick Young gif where he shoots and he turns around and it just rims out. It might be something like that, but no, you're right. Like he that's another thing that I think is really cool. Like, how many Division I coaches or big time coaches do you think would sit down with little old podcasts? Like, you see a lot of them do the big shows, right? Like, of course, a lot of them are on with Goodman, Field of 68, of course, but I mean, he's done. I've seen plenty of podcasts with just even the little guys, and it's like a cool humility factor. You know what I mean? But I know. Like, we're gonna continue talking about it, and Friday we'll have a little bit more. And like I mentioned with that basketball immersion account, Chris Oliver that I've been talking to, I might reach out to him, maybe see about getting him on, and possibly, up to Dusty if he is the hire. So. That would be super cool. That'd be huge for us and super cool to have him on. And I know everybody in chat would love to see that too. So,
all right, guys, I think we're going to wrap this up. We've talked a lot about Dusty. We'll keep it up in, what's going on with Dusty. We're going to keep track of it in the coming days. Obviously, they have a big game against Northwestern on Friday. And then if they win that one, we know they're getting UConn. We don't even have to guess that UConn's going to lose the 16th seed. Not happening. So if they get past that, then they've got a really big game. And, we may really hear things ramp up next week if they don't win that one. And if they do, it's just more on the hype train, really, because that would be a huge win. That being said, guys, I really appreciate the amount of people that we've had, the amount of feedback we've gotten. I've gotten a lot of messages on Twitter and right now as I'm doing this show. And I appreciate all your support. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. If you're just now joining us late, please go back to the beginning. We got into the Dusty stuff about 20 minutes into it, 25 minutes into it, but we talked about the coaching updates with Scott Drew and where we go from there, what we're hearing on Dusty, what other people are apparently hearing on Dusty, and what it could all mean. And then we got into this stuff, and we've spent a good chunk of time doing a deep dive, just to paraphrase what happened on the show tonight. We will also have the show uploaded, so we will upload it on the Spotify, on the Apple. I had a couple of people that asked me about that. Ash has actually moved to Louisville again. So Ash is our the founder of Third Banner Pod, and he does a lot of the creative content and produced it. And so he has all the access to the platforms and uploads those. So now that he's settled in, he'll probably be able to do that more. And then we'll be able to do on-site pods sometimes, maybe. Now that Ash is in town and lives here, that's great. I'm actually the one that's an out-of-towner now, living about an hour or so away, but I can make it work too. That being said, I'll turn it over to you guys. I just want to thank you guys for joining with us tonight, and give me any positive or negative feedback. Just be respectful if it's negative, and just let us know what you guys want to see on here in the future.
Yeah, guys. I appreciate everybody getting on. And like Kyle said, we're always looking to get better. So, you have suggestions about what you want to see on the pod, what you want to hear us talking about. Always, feel free to comment about that stuff. I think we're entering the stretch run of this coaching search. I think in the next week, 2 weeks, we'll have our next head coach, which will be exciting because then we can start talking about the roster and who do they bring in, what who do we need to replace, who do we need to keep, stuff like that, which will obviously be a different chapter, but a fun chapter. And really the last thing I want to say, other than, again, thanks for being here. Subscribe if you like us, is we've got our tournament bracket pool going on. I think we've got it linked on our Twitter. It's a pinned message. So get in there and join that. We're going to give a $50 gift card. And how I'm going to do this is kind of any gift card that I can send you electronically is what it will be. So basically you get to pick where your gift card is going to be as long as I can send it to you electronically. But yeah, $50 gift card the first, a $25 gift card the second, and a $10 gift card the third. And obviously, even without those, it bragging rights, and it's fun to compete with listeners and obviously us. We're all going to have a bracket in there too. So please join that and see how you do.
Yeah, you hit on it. And Pat, when I win, I'll take a $50 gift card to Cane's.
There you go, man.
So,
somebody earlier said Power 10 and Third Banner Super Show. Shout out to the Power 10 guys.
Let's do it.
We may have to do that sometime. I don't know how it would work platform wise, but we can figure that out down the road. But
we might indeed. Thank you guys for tuning in. All the subscribers recently, like we've kind of made a big push on here. And we respect, we love to see it. So thank you guys for all the new subs. Like Pat said, join the bracket challenge. I've been pushing it out on Twitter, pushing it out on Facebook. I'm going to probably do another tweet tonight, maybe in the morning or so. You still have time to join. Use code TTBP to join. Free to play. And we'll get started tomorrow. So thank you all for tuning in tonight. I'm going to end with go Cards and go Owls. Go Owls.
All right, go Cards and go Owls.
There you go. Let's go Cards.